I hate intros, Psychopath Season 2. We kick things off with an explosion going off in a public square, and although there weren't any casualties, the Public Safety Bureau are sent to handle it. Akane is back at it and working with a new inspector, Mika Shimotsuki, and some new enforcers, Sakuya Togane and Sho Hinakawa. Ginoza and Yayoi from Season 1 are still working with her as well after Ginoza's demotion to enforcer. They pinpoint the perp's hideout and close in on him, but it turns out to be a trap with a bomb detonating when they get close. The suspect manages to escape in the chaos and takes a hostage with him. He releases the hostage soon after, but they figure it's a decoy or another trap, so they stick on the suspect. Once they corner him, Akane sees that his psychopath score is just over 300, warranting lethal action from her dominator. She decides against killing him and instead tries to calm him down enough to lower his score. This ends up working and she is able to use the dominator's paralysis mode instead of killing him. Meanwhile, an inspector from Division 2, Mizue Shisui, and her enforcer Yamatoya track down the hostage. The woman turns out to be a man who doesn't register on the Dominator's scans. He injects Mizue with a drug paralyzing her and uses her Dominator to kill Yamatoya. The killer also leaves behind a message reading WC written in blood. Episode 2. Akane interrogates the bomber to find out how he was able to keep his hue so clear while preparing the bombs and avoiding detection. He hysterically explains that somebody else was helping him and is responsible for keeping his score low. Inspector Aoyanagi is helping with the case but doesn't buy his story because nobody else was detected in the area. They learn the fake hostage was a complicated hologram model based off of a young girl that died years ago. Soon after, the bomber's score mysteriously drops drastically beneath that of a latent criminal, resulting in him being transferred to a different facility. Back at her apartment, Akane notices WC scratched into her wall right before she is informed that the bomber attacked Aoyanagi and escaped. They catch up to him after a short chase and he is killed by Aoyanagi as he utters the name Kamui. They also learn that the WC might stand for what color, referring to the hue of a person as in what kind of person are you. Episode 3. Inspector Shisui that was drugged and captured by the mastermind Kirito Kamui wakes up tied to a chair missing an eye. Her score starts to raise sporadically as she realizes the situation, but then Kamui does something that makes her score suddenly drop and calms her down. Back to Akane and the others who are investigating the message that appeared in her apartment but don't find anything. She goes to get help from Saiga, who's locked up after turning himself in for helping Kogami in Season 1. After that, she meets with Chief Kase to get permission to dive deeper into the case chasing this ghost. Kase approves of this but also warns Akane to be wary of one of her enforcers, Togane. Akane's partner goes out on a call to arrest a public figure named Masuda, who says to call Kamui because he'll make him better again. Meanwhile, Aoyanagi had went to a mental care facility after being told to by the captured Cyclops Shisui over the phone. A crazy man suddenly takes all of the people in the facility hostage, including Aoyanagi, who can't use her Dominator because his score isn't high at all. He also mentions something about Kamui keeping his hue clear. Episode 4. The prisoners inside are stripped down by the man who then starts beating them to death one by one to raise their scores. The whole time he claims to be doing this in the name of Kamui, his savior. Akane gets a hunch that Kamui is actually somewhere inside the facility and is able to use Dominators. Finding that she can't use her Dominator, Aoyanagi rushes the culprit, stabbing him with some glass. She then releases the security doors to get help from Division 1, which is Akane's division, and Division 3 agents outside. However, since everybody's score is way too high from the stressful situation, they are slaughtered by the agents in Division 3. This includes Aoyanagi, who was shot by a sniper because she had one of the highest scores. When Akane arrives on the scene, they find another WC on the ground inside the facility. Episode 5. Shisui now seems to be under Kamui's spell and he's using her eye to wield a Dominator. While investigating the massacre scene, Mika spots Togane pointing his Dominator at Akane to supposedly check her score. The next day, Division 1 and 3 are sent out to investigate a drone warehouse. While doing so, Akane and Togane come across a holographic wall covering a secret room. Inside the room are masks made up of people's faces and another WC written on the wall. The combat drones that are being built at the facility suddenly start to come online. The drones are being piloted by people on their phones who think they're playing a new game called Hungry Chicken, when in reality they're using the drones to kill people. Saiga, who's helping with the investigation, talks with the public figure Masuda. After studying his speeches, he noticed that he is actually an entirely different person. Over to Mika, who is now suspicious of Togane after what she saw, so she goes to investigate his room. She finds an alarming amount of photos and files on Akane. Episode 6. Shion is working on preventing the game from spreading to more devices. Akane soon realizes that Kamui's real goal is to collect the Dominators, so she orders enforcers to stay near their inspectors since the Dominators won't work on them. Shisui is there with Kamui and kills one of the lone enforcers to retrieve his Dominator. After destroying most of the combat drones, the Hungry Chicken game starts using police drones instead. Shion is able to stop the program from making it look like a game and shows the players what they're actually doing. This leads to a lot of people's scores skyrocketing from seeing the carnage that they caused. Akane manages to find Kamui but can't take action because he's still invisible to the Dominator. They have a brief and rather pointless talk before he escapes on a boat with Shisui. Episode 7. Mika and her enforcers go around trying to stop people who are still playing the game despite knowing that they're killing other people. Meanwhile, Akane is trying to find out what Kamui is planning on doing with the Dominators. We have a brief scene of Akane checking up on her grandmother who is hospitalized, and after that she goes to see Chief Kase. Kase is okay with killing Kamui, suggesting that the Sybil system can't integrate him in like the typical asymptomatic criminal. Sakuya picked up on the fact that Mika was snooping around his room because he has a camera recording while he's gone. Mika did some more digging on him and found out that all of the inspectors he previously worked under became latent criminals and were executed by him. Over to Hinakawa, who discovered another holo similar to the hostage holo in episode 1. Both holos were aged versions of kids that died in a plane crash 15 years ago. They find out the crash had one survivor, Kamui, giving them his full name. They follow this up by taking in Yohei Masazuki, a surgeon that was working with Kamui. After aging up the other children from the crash, they learn that Kamui has dozens of people working with him right under their noses. Episode 8. During his interrogation, Masazaki explains to Saiga why Kamui is invisible to the Sybil system. After surviving the crash, he was integrated with parts from 184 other bodies in multiple surgeries, including 7 brain parts. The system can't measure a collective group of people like that, so he became invisible. He hated feeling invisible, so his goal is to be measured, asking what color am I and what color is the Sybil system. Mika found out that the one responsible for Kamui's surgeries is Sakuya's mother, Misako Togane, who died 5 years ago. They think that Kamui might be seeking revenge on the Togane Foundation for making him invisible. Mika tried to pass this information along to Chief Kase. This kind of backfires because Misako Togane was actually integrated into the Sybil system. Her son Sakuya restrains Mika, and they plan to test how she responds to learning the truth about the Sybil system. Episode 9. Mika learns about the people who make up the Sybil system, as well as the fact that Sakuya is actually an artificially created human. They then want to use Mika's help to turn Akane's hue black. But first they have to kill Masazaki, who knew too much about Misako after working with her during Kamui's surgeries. Once he's gone, they set their sights on Akane's grandmother, Aoi, who's still in the hospital. Meanwhile, Akane follows up on a lead in the form of Koichi Kawashima, who is a childhood friend of Kamui. Koichi helps Kamui get revenge on a company that benefited from turning a blind eye to the plane crash. Akane and the others arrive on the scene shortly after, where Kamui had fled, but Koichi stays behind to greet them. He then gives a box to Akane containing the ear of her grandmother Aoi, causing her to go into a rage. Kamui makes his next move, hijacking a subway train, and we get a short look at Akane's grandmother, who's actually being held captive by Sakuya. Episode 10. Kamui uses explosives to flood the subways, taking 500 passengers hostage. He then uses the Dominators to paralyze the passengers, and with too many people being paralyzed, it causes an overload in the system, giving them access to its bypass system. Kase shows pictures of Akane's now dead grandmother to her to try and convince her to assassinate Kamui. She decides against this, of course, and goes into the subway tunnels, where she runs into Sakuya. She tells him that she had deduced the connection between him and his mother in the Sybil system, along with their plans to cloud her hue by killing Kamui. Kamui then appears behind them and prepares to fire his Dominator at Sakuya. Episode 11. Akane blocks Kamui's shot, preventing the Dominator from going off, and she subdues Sakuya. She handcuffs Sakuya and leaves him behind to take Kamui to the Sybil's core. Before they could reach the core, they are confronted by Kase being piloted by Misako. Sybil had gained the ability to measure her score as an individual even though she's in the Sybil system. Her score ends up being over 300, so Kamui goes on to execute her cyborg body. After dealing with her, they continue on to the core of Sybil. Once there, Sybil, for the first time, acknowledges Kamui's existence by authorizing the measurement of a collective psychopath. With this new skill, it can also measure itself as a collective psychopath. When Sybil measures itself, the score is too high, so it begins destroying some of the high-scoring brains, lowering its overall score down to 0. We get a quick look at Shisui, who is still holding off the other agents and is eventually paralyzed, neutralizing the threat. Back over to Akane, who is ordered by Sybil to kill Kamui, which cues the entrance of Sakuya. He's still dedicated to trying to darken Akane's hue, so he begins to brag about how he was actually the one that killed her grandmother. Kamui calms her down before anything can happen, and he stands up to Sakuya. Both of them end up trading Dominator shots, and Kamui is killed instantly. Sakuya survives the shot and scurries away, where he is later found by Mika. She considers executing him for forcing her to be a pawn in his plan, but can't bring herself to do it. It doesn't matter though, because he later bleeds out and Mika keeps everything about her forced cooperation as well as Sybil's true form to herself. I'm going to be doing the future seasons, and that'll be in the bottom left whenever I'm finished with it, or you can check out all the Psycho-Pass recaps in this playlist here. You can also find the links in the description below, and the only thing I hate more than intros is outros.